I used to think love was a kind of gravity, something that pulled people toward you when it mattered most. Turns out, love is lighter than I thought. Easy to forget, easy to ignore, easy to excuse. My wedding day was supposed to be a soft, glowing thing. Not grand, I've never been good at spectacle, but beautiful in its own quiet way. We picked a rooftop cafe garden with mismatched chairs and string lights, the kind of place that looked like it had kept a few secrets. The guest list was small, intimate. My husband, Ethan, wanted it that way. Just close friends. A few cousins. Some family, though, for me. Family was always a brittle word. When my mom, Paulina, said they couldn't afford to come, I didn't flinch. I offered to help. When she hesitated, I covered it all. Flights, outfits, even Derek's ticket, because God forbid my older brother travel without comfort. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment they showed up for me. Fully, completely. They didn't. At 3, trying to pee. My best friend Riley, in a green dress that fluttered in the wind, stepped into the dressing room. Her voice was gentle. They're asking if we should start. I blinked. My phone had stayed silent. I asked her for 5 more minutes. She nodded. Didn't say anything about the way my hands were shaking. Just stood beside me. A soft shadow. At 3:37. My phone rang. My mother's name lit up like a bad punchline. "Oh, sweetheart," she chirped. We couldn't make it. There was no car crash. No illness. Just a poetry reading Derek didn't want to miss. I said nothing. She filled the silence like it was a pothole. Family's about support. Right. Then, from the background, Derek's voice. Maybe next time. My wedding day cracked a little at the edges. And then it broke. It's strange what stays with you. Not the vows. Not even the applause. What I remember is Riley taking my arm like she'd done it 100 times before, even though she never had. Her touch was steady. Her eyes calm, the kind of calm that comes from watching someone you love break and not looking away. "You ready?" she asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. She walked me down the aisle beneath fairy lights I'd strung myself, past tables I'd hand-lettered, into a ceremony I'd built around the idea that just this once I wouldn't be invisible. They say weddings are about beginnings. For me, it felt like the end of an old, aching chapter. Ethan waited for me at the altar, his face unreadable at first, but when our eyes met, he smiled, not the kind that tries to fix pain, but the kind that simply stays with you through it. The ceremony moved like water, vows spoken, rings slipped on, laughter, some tears, a kiss, a cheer, photos taken beside ivy-covered walls. Everyone clapped, except the ghosts I had set places for at the table. At the reception, I smiled, toasted, danced, played the part of someone who had not been gutted just hours before, but under the warmth of string lights and soft jazz, something inside me cooled, hardened. I didn't speak about the phone call, not to Ethan, not to Riley, not to anyone. But when we returned to the hotel that night, me out of my tux, him still in his jacket, I sat at the desk by the window and opened my laptop. Ethan came up behind me, rested his hand on my shoulder. "You sure you want to do this?" Once you hit send, I know. He didn't say anything else, and so I sent it the file I had compiled in silence over months. Screenshots, messages, voicemails, recordings. Truth, unfiltered. The side of Derek that Paulina refused to see, or maybe chose not to. I watched the email disappear into the digital ether. Then I closed the laptop. Outside, the city buzzed on like it didn't know what I'd done. Or maybe it did. Maybe it was applauding. The thing about silence is that it doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's the prelude to a collapse. The morning after I sent the file, a neat little digital grenade wrapped in timestamps and text threads, my phone started buzzing like it had something to say. It didn't. Not really. Just missed calls from my mother. A few from Derek. One from a number I didn't recognize but didn't need to. I knew the area code. Hometown. I didn't answer. I made coffee, petted our cat, read an article about light pollution, pretended to forget my phone existed. Ethan raised an eyebrow but didn't push. He understood the rhythm of grief, when to lean in, when to give space. A few hours later, the first text landed. Not from my family, but from my cousin Marcus, a guy whose emotional range was usually limited to sports scores and gifs of dancing bears. "Yo, heard Derek got nuked. Damn. You good?" And so it began, like ink in water. The story spread. I didn't tell it. I didn't need to. The screenshots did the talking. The private messages Derek had sent while married. The recordings where he laughed about how easy it was to cheat. The voice memo he drunkenly left me last year, slurring out confessions and self-pity in equal measure that I'd quietly saved. I had been holding receipts long before I ever considered using them. From what I gathered, Derek's husband, a kind man named Jonathan, who'd once brought gluten-free cupcakes to a family reunion, read the file after the poetry reading. No confrontation, no public blow-up, just silence. And then movement. Jonathan left 2 days later, quietly, like a shadow folding into itself. By the end of the week, the papers were filed: divorce, financial disentanglement, legal boundary lines carved deep and final. But Jonathan didn't stop there. Turns out, he wasn't just a patient partner. He was the financial scaffolding propping up my mother's world. The boutique Paulina opened for fun but never turned a profit. Jonathan's name was on the lease, the emergency fund that magically covered surprise bills. Jonathan's generosity, even the credit card Derek never paid on time, Jonathan covered it like clockwork. Until he didn't. The collapse wasn't a fire. It was a slow, cold leak. Vendors pulled out of Paulina's boutique, citing unpaid invoices. Suppliers stopped returning calls. The bank declined her request for a new business line of credit. Utilities, once magically resolved, began to go past due, and I played my part. Unsubscribed from their chaos. 2 years ago, I'd agreed to co-sign on their new car after Paulina guilt-tripped me with the usual refrain. "You're the only one who understands responsibility?" I removed myself from the lease. I cancelled the auto payments I had set up in moments of misguided hope. Utilities, insurance gaps. Even a dental bill Derek once ignored. I closed the shared savings account, the one I created when I still believed we could be something like a family. No fight. No explanation. Just release. They didn't notice right away, but they would. That's how rot works. Quiet, invisible, until the structure starts to groan under its own weight. At night, I sat with it all, the echo of empty seats at my wedding, the lingering ache of hoping for people who never showed up. I let the grief take up space. I didn't rush it, didn't try to shrink it. There was something strangely sacred in finally letting go of people who had always asked me to disappear. I used to think cutting off my family would feel like losing a limb, but it didn't. It felt like setting down a weight I didn't realise I'd been dragging through every version of myself. Some nights I'd lie in bed, Ethan snoring softly beside me, and think about the small things, how Paulina once told me I read too much, or the time Derek erased me from a group photo because I looked awkward. They seemed trivial then. Now I see them for what they were. Cracks in a foundation no one cared to repair. I stopped answering texts, ignored calls. When Paulina emailed me a single line, "We need to talk," I closed the app and went back to organising our baby registry. Yes, that. I hadn't told them yet. I wasn't going to. Ethan and I found out 2 weeks after the wedding. A soft pink line on a stick in a hotel bathroom. The air still smelling like celebration and champagne. I cried. Not from fear, from something deeper. Something like relief. This child is tiny. Unexpected spark would never have to earn love by being useful. Would never have to lower his voice to make space for someone louder. Would never wonder if a parent's absence meant they weren't enough. We would be the kind of family we never had. And Paulina, Derek, they would never even know his name. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of day that can't decide between spring and storm, where the rain doesn't fall so much as it slams sideways, as if trying to peel paint from the walls. The wind howled like it had a score to settle. I remember that because I had just folded a drawer full of tiny onesies, soft cotton in mint and grey, with little stars stitched across the chest. I had just set one aside, the first we'd bought, the one I never showed my mother, the one she'd never see. Then came the doorbell. Not once. 5 times. Fast, like someone was holding the button with their whole palm, like the door itself had offended them. Ethan froze mid-step in the kitchen. We locked eyes across the counter. He didn't need to ask. We both knew. I wiped my hands on my shirt and walked to the door. The peephole confirmed it. Paulina, rain-soaked and fuming. Derek beside her, jaw tight. A duffel bag slung over one shoulder. And behind them, one more suitcase than I'd expected. They'd brought everything. I didn't open the door immediately, just stood there, forehead pressed against the wood, breathing through the pounding in my chest. Ethan stepped up behind me, one hand light on my back. "We can call now," he said, voice low. "Not yet," I whispered. "I want to see how this plays out." So I opened the door. They pushed in without a word. Water dripped onto the hardwood as Paulina shook out her coat like she owned the place. Derek dumped his bag in the centre of the living room. Neither looked at me. Neither asked to come in. Paulina gave me a tight nod, eyes darting past me like she was taking inventory. "We're not leaving," she said. "Not until you fix this," Derek added. "Fix this." As if I had broken something, I shut the door behind them with a calmness that didn't feel like mine. They launched into it right away. A full-court verbal press. Paulina demanded I call Jonathan Derek's now ex-husband and explain that it was all just a misunderstanding. Jealousy. A bitter brother trying to cause trouble. She wanted me to walk it back. Lie. "You embarrassed this family," she hissed. "You ruined everything," Derek added. They didn't ask why I did it. They didn't ask if the messages were real. They didn't even deny the contents. They just demanded I erase it all. It was surreal. Standing there in my own home, as they treated me like a misbehaving employee rather than a son they'd abandoned. "I'm not calling anyone," I said. Finally, Paulina scoffed. "Then we're staying here until you do." She began outlining sleeping arrangements. Derek wandered toward the guest room like it was already his. I stood in the hallway, pulse steady, strangely detached. Riley had once told me that when people show you who they are, believe them. I believed them now. "You're trespassing," I said quietly. They blinked, confused. Paulina's voice rose in pitch. "You invited us." "I didn't even tell you where I lived." Behind me, Ethan was already on the phone, calm, efficient, speaking with the kind of clarity that comes from being both furious and right. Derek stepped forward, his body language shifting. "You don't call the cops on family?" I smiled thinly. "I thought family didn't abandon you on your wedding day." Silence followed. Not the angry kind. The kind that finally understood it was over. 15 minutes later, there was another knock. 2 officers, professional, patient. They asked questions. Took my ID. I showed them the lease. My name. Ethan's name. No one else. They turned to Paulina and Derek. Gave them a chance to leave calmly. It was more than they'd given me. Of course, Paulina cried. Derek yelled. Accused me of destroying what little we had left. But they packed their things and stepped back into the rain. After they left, I sat on the couch like my body didn't quite remember how to function. Ethan brought me tea. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The baby kicked a soft, impossible flutter. I placed my hand over my stomach and let the quiet settle. This is family now. Not them. We moved a few weeks later. Nothing dramatic. No big announcement. Just boxes, a different lease, a deeper quiet. The new house had a small garden and a front porch that Ethan liked to sit on in the morning, coffee in hand, while reading weather updates like they were poetry. We didn't tell anyone the new address. Not even Marcus. Only Riley knew. She showed up with a plant she claimed was impossible to kill, which meant it would probably die in a week. But the gesture meant more than I could say. Life settled. Not in the way people think healing does with parties or perfect closure, but in small, quiet moments. The first ultrasound, a night where the power went out, and we lit candles and played board games. A morning where I didn't check my phone first thing. I still heard bits of the fallout. The boutique never reopened. Derek lost a few friends. Some tried to defend him. Most didn't. The whispers travelled through the family like smoke. Everyone smelled the fire, but no one wanted to claim they saw it burn. I let them talk. I didn't talk back. That was the final boundary. Not just cutting them out, but refusing to explain why again and again to people who were never really listening. Some endings don't need justification. Some beginnings are enough. Sometimes I still wake up too early. Not from nightmares, not anymore, but from habit. From years of being on edge. From always anticipating the next guilt trip. The next demand disguised as love. The next cold silence served like a punishment for not being enough. But now, the silence feels different. It's soft. It's mine. Ethan usually sleeps through the early hours. He's one of those rare people who looks at peace when unconscious, like the universe is whispering him lullabies. I watch him sometimes, just to remember what love looks like when it isn't trying to be earned. There's a comfort in knowing that we're building something from the wreckage, not just surviving it. Our daughter is due next month. We picked out her name quietly, on a rainy Sunday afternoon while sharing pancakes and bad jokes on the couch. It came out of nowhere, a name neither of us had planned on, but instantly felt like hers. It's not a family name, not tied to anyone who ever made me feel small. It's just hers, and that's enough. We haven't told anyone, not because we're hiding, but because some things don't belong to people who wouldn't celebrate them. Some things are sacred. I never responded to the emails that followed after the police escorted Paulina and Derek out of our home. They shifted in tone from anger to pleading to performative regret. We're still your family. You don't understand the pressure we were under. It's time to come home. I didn't answer, because I am home. Riley visits every few weeks, sometimes with her girlfriend, sometimes alone. She brings books for the baby. And once, a handmade onesie that said, "Raised by real ones." I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Sometimes we sit on the porch and talk about the old days, the tree house that collapsed midsummer, the time I almost set the garage on fire trying to build a makeshift science lab. We talk about who we were and who we became in spite of it. Not once has she asked about my mother or Derek. That's the thing about chosen family. They understand that silence can be sacred too. From time to time, updates trickle in. I don't seek them. They just arrive. Through whispers in group chats I forgot to leave, through acquaintances with no sense of boundaries. Paulina sold the house, claimed she was downsizing for peace. Derek moved in with a friend from college. The boutique quietly filed for bankruptcy. Someone told me Paulina's new Instagram bio reads Healing Era. I didn't laugh. I just closed the app because I'm not interested in their rebranding. I'm interested in my life, the one they didn't help build, the one they don't get to claim. One night, maybe a week ago, I found an old family photo while sorting through a box of random clutter. It was from some holiday years back, the four of us standing stiffly in front of a fireplace, Paulina's hand gripping Derek's shoulder like a medal. I was there too. Off to the side, cropped slightly, as if even the camera knew my place. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slid it back into the box, shut the lid, and carried it to the garage. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. Some memories are just artifacts, relics from a version of yourself that you've outgrown. Ethan painted the nursery soft sage green. There's a mobile above the crib made of tiny paper cranes we folded together on rainy evenings. Each one carries a name on the inside, not family names. Not apologies waiting to be granted, but moments, words that matter. First laugh, Riley's hug, warm tea, quiet. Our daughter will grow up wrapped in those moments. She will know love not as currency, but as constant. She will not have to earn space at the table. She will be the table. And Paulina, Derek, they will never know her name. Not because of anger, not even revenge, but because absence is sometimes the most honest legacy you can leave behind. Do I ever wonder if it was too much? Of course I do. Do I question if the silence I chose is just another kind of loneliness? Sometimes. But then I look around at the man who never made me compete for his attention, at the friend who stayed when others faded, at the little heartbeat growing stronger each day. And I know I didn't go too far. They just never believed I'd go anywhere at all. Story 2. My name's Claire. I'm 34. Work as a senior product designer for a sustainability startup in Seattle. I don't really post much on social media.
I'm not flashy, and I don't crave attention. But my younger sister, completely different story. Her name's Bella. She's 27. An Instagram influencer who lives for brand deals, reels, and red carpets. Our parents eat up everything she does. Always have. I was the responsible one. The independent one. which was just a nicer way of saying she'll take care of herself. Let's focus on Bella. I met my fiancé, Daniel, a year and a half ago. He's a quiet kind of brilliant architect, calm, deep thinker. We bonded over a shared love of old buildings, strong coffee, and quiet bookstores. We got engaged in October, and the moment he proposed, I knew exactly where I wanted to get married, a contemporary art museum downtown, where he first took me for a lecture. We locked in May 14th, a Saturday, over a year in advance. It was the only day that worked for us, the only one that held meaning. Everything was booked. Dress, florist, invites, catering. It was all lined up. Then Bella called out of the blue one Sunday, asking if we could do dinner at my parents' place. Said she had big news. I should have known. We show up. My mom's pouring champagne. My dad's grinning like it's Christmas morning. And Bella is already halfway into a squeal. I'm engaged, she says, flashing a ring the size of a cocktail shrimp. And we've set the date. I smile, genuinely happy for half a second, until she says, we're getting married on May 14th. I blink. You mean next year? No, this May. Same weekend as you. My stomach flipped. Bella, that's my date. That's when Daniel and I are getting married. She giggles. Yeah, but you didn't patent it or anything. Besides, yours is like a small wedding, right? Ours is going to be more high profile. I looked at our parents, waiting for someone to step in. My dad just shrugged. You might want to be flexible. Claire, Bella's wedding will have more guests, more visibility. It's better for the family. My mom chimed in with the classic. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Yours is more personal. You can always move it to the following weekend. I stood there in complete disbelief. They weren't asking. They were informing me. I left dinner early. Bella texted later that night. Hope you're not mad. Let's talk soon. I didn't respond. The next morning, the art museum coordinator called. I figured it was just a confirmation check-in. Instead, she told me there had been a last-minute change. The venue had been rebooked under a new name. Isabella Green? Bella. I asked if this was a mistake. She hesitated and apologized. Said the museum was unaware there was a conflict. But the deposit had been doubled, and a PR team was now coordinating with them. She sounded uncomfortable, like someone who knew she was reading bad news off a script. I hung up and stood in our kitchen frozen. When Daniel walked in and saw my face, I didn't even have to explain. She took it, I said quietly. She took everything. Daniel stayed calm. We'll find somewhere else, he said. But I shook my head. You don't understand. She waited, watched everything get set, then pulled this. It's not about the space, it's about control. Daniel nodded. Then we don't bend. We don't break. Come with me. We got in his car and drove north, winding through trees and hills until we pulled up to a gated property I'd never seen before. The guard let us in without a word. After 10 minutes on a private drive, the trees opened up to a wide estate, part glass, part wood, all stunning. This is the Redwood Estate, Daniel said. I designed it. I stared at him. You never said. He smiled. I don't talk about it much. My family owns this land. I kept it quiet because people change when they find out who you are. He handed me a key. Use it, he said. For the wedding, for whatever you want. They took your plans. Let's build something better. That night, while trying to absorb all of this, I got a DM from Bella's fiancé. No, it read, you deserved better. Can we talk? I froze. Why would he reach out? What could he possibly want? I didn't respond right away. Noah's message sat there on my screen like a splinter, unexpected, small, but impossible to ignore. You deserved better. Can we talk? This guy had never spoken to me directly before. I only ever saw him in family photos or heard my mom brag about his job head of marketing at some luxury lifestyle brand. I figured he was like everyone else in Bella's world, polished, a surface level, content to orbit around her spotlight. But now, here he was, DMing me like someone who had seen the light. I didn't show the message to Daniel, not yet. Instead, I wrote back a single word. Why? His reply came fast. Because I'm not stupid, and I think I'm being used. We met the next afternoon, somewhere neutral. A coffee shop in Capitol Hill. Public, no chance for drama. I showed up first, sat in a corner booth with a clear view of the street. When Noah arrived, he looked off, less confident than usual. Still well-dressed, still put together, but his eyes didn't match the suit. He sat down across from me, didn't order anything, just leaned forward. I didn't know. he said. No preamble. She told me the venue was available, that you were planning something smaller and had backed out for budget reasons. I raised an eyebrow. Do I look like someone who gave up? He let out a dry laugh. No. You look pissed, and honestly, you should be. For the next 20 minutes, he laid it all out. The lies, the way Bella spun every story to make herself look like the self-made star and everyone else a footnote. She told him I was emotionally unstable, that I never wanted a wedding, that I had ghosted the gallery, and she had saved face for the family. I could feel my jaw clenching, my hands curled into fists under the table. Then he dropped the real bomb. She has a second phone? I blinked. A what? Burner. Keeps it in her vanity drawer. I caught her on it twice, texting someone late at night. I asked her once, and she accused me of snooping, said it was for business. But she deletes everything right after. Business, I repeated flatly. She's hiding something, and I don't trust her anymore. That made two of us. Noah pulled out a flash drive from his coat pocket and slid it across the table. I made copies, he said. Screenshots, voicemails, even a screen recording of a call she made to the museum coordinator. I stared at the flash drive. It looked harmless, but I knew it wasn't. She wanted to ruin your wedding, he said. She admitted it. Said she couldn't stand the idea of you getting attention, that you were always the quiet one. And this was her year. My stomach turned. She told me once, he added, that your light had to be dimmed for hers to shine. I sat there in stunned silence. I'd always suspected it, but hearing it said out loud, confirmed by someone so close to her, was something else entirely. Noah watched me for a moment, then said, whatever you're planning, I want in. That night, I told Daniel everything. I didn't hold back, not the messages, the coffee shop meetup, not even the burner phone. He wasn't angry, not with me. He just looked calm, steady, like he'd already seen this ending before and was just waiting for me to catch up. This is exactly why we don't play small, he said. They wanted you humiliated. Now we show them what they really woke up. We spent the next few days working quietly. Daniel made calls, a few to old contacts, a few to newer ones. I didn't ask for detail. He just said, trust me. Meanwhile, we had our wedding invitations hand-delivered, gold foil, custom lettering, all RSVP'd through a private link connected to the Redwood estate. Guests were already talking, not just because of the venue, but because of the name. See, what Bella never knew, what my family never cared to ask, was who Daniel really was. His full name is Daniel Redwood, as in Redwood Estates, Redwood Development, Redwood Architecture. His family built half the city skyline, and he preferred to keep it quiet, until now. Then came the final spark. Bella called me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Hey sis, she said in that sugary tone she always used when she was pretending we were close. Just a heads up, we're dropping our wedding trailer this weekend. Wanted you to know in case it makes yours look a little underwhelming. No hard feelings. No hard feelings. I didn't reply, because 2 hours later, before she could post anything, the press beat her to it. A major design blog ran a headline, Redwood heir to wed local designer at private art estate. Guest list includes fashion and architecture elite. It hit 3 trending by nightfall. And guess who found out in real time? Bella. She texted me in all caps. What did you do? Noah won't finalize our guest list. What did you tell him? I didn't answer, because Daniel was finalizing something else, the seating chart, and the name at table 3, the editor-in-chief of Gloss Modern, the one Bella had been trying to get a feature with for 3 years. The morning of our wedding felt quiet, not silent, just grounded. The sun was out, clear skies, which was rare for May in Washington. Light filtered through the tall evergreens around the Redwood estate. It smelled like pine and fresh earth, and the air carried that mix of nerves and joy that only comes around once or twice in a lifetime. Inside the bridal suite, I stood barefoot, staring at the mirror. My dress was simple but perfect. Ivory silk, clean lines, designed by a friend I met in college who now had her own label in New York. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't second-guessing. I felt ready, not just to get married, but to stop being quiet about the way I'd been treated for years. About an hour before the ceremony, Noah arrived at the suite. He was on the guest list, Daniel insisted. And honestly, I was glad. He knocked gently and handed me a small velvet box. What is this? I asked. Insurance, he said. Inside was the flash drive. But this time, it wasn't just screenshots. He had added video, recordings, Proof that Bella had bribed the original museum coordinator to bump our reservation, threatened them with bad press, and laughed about it in calls. She said the only way your wedding wouldn't embarrass hers was if it didn't happen at all. He told me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded, thanked him, and tucked the flash drive into the folds of my dress bag. The ceremony started at 2:00 p. Sharp, the exact time Bella had once claimed for herself. Daniel was waiting at the altar. The chairs were filled with guests, friends, mentors, artists, even people I hadn't seen in years, but who had quietly supported me when no one else did. I walked down the aisle with no regrets, no need to prove anything. But the reception, that's where it all came full circle. After dinner, after the speeches, Daniel stood up with a champagne flute and said, "Before we wrap up, we want to share something, not because it's dramatic, but because it's honest." The screen behind us lit up. It started with a voicemail, Bella's voice, unmistakable. "Claire will cancel. She always does." She folds. "I'm just pushing her a little faster." Then came screenshots, her conversations with the venue, texts to a friend about burying Claire's tiny wedding in a real one. Gasps filled the room, but no one moved. The last clip played next, a video grainy, from a phone, but clear enough. Bella laughing with her makeup artist. If she really cared about that guy, she'd step aside. Daniel's hot but broke. This is just for her self-esteem. And then, silence. You could feel the air shift. Then, applause. Not polite clapping. Real, visceral applause. Like everyone had just seen something that confirmed what they suspected, and were relieved someone finally said it out loud. And then, like clockwork, the doors opened. Bella stood there in a gown meant for Instagram, not real life. Her makeup was streaked, her shoes soaked, her mouth open in shock. She looked around the room like it was a set she'd been excluded from. My mother was the first to stand. She walked toward Bella and, in a voice that was sharper than I'd ever heard, said, "Enough. You've embarrassed us all. This isn't your day." Bella blinked. Her voice cracked. "But you need help," Mom said. Not a spotlight. And just like that, she was alone. The golden child outshined by her own shadow. After the wedding went viral, yes. The video made it to several wedding blogs. The fallout came quick. Bella's brand deals dropped. Her manager cut ties. The reality show pilot she was developing quietly died in pre-production. Noah released a public statement. "I've chosen to end our engagement. I support mental wellness and integrity." And this relationship no longer reflects either. He even donated their wedding venue deposit to a domestic women's shelter in my name. Bella. She disappeared from social media, deactivated everything, moved back in with my parents, who finally stopped pretending this was all a phase. The influencer? Gone. The star of the family? Dimmed. Daniel and I left for our honeymoon in Florence 2 weeks later. We ate too much, walked through art museums until our feet ached, sat on balconies with wine and laughed about the insanity of it all. It was peaceful, honest, beautiful, and it was mine. When we got home, a letter was waiting for me. No return address, just my name in handwriting I knew too well. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "This isn't over. You stole everything from me. Just wait." I read it once. Then I burned it, because here's the truth. I didn't steal anything. I just finally stopped giving it away. Story 3. My name's Leah Bennett, and up until a few years ago, I was the chief financial officer of a billion-dollar pharmaceutical company founded by my grandfather. I grew up thinking I'd carry on the legacy, keep the family proud, fix what needed fixing. Instead, I exposed a cover-up worth millions, and they locked me away for it. This is the story of how I went from corporate golden girl to disgraced daughter, and why they'll regret ever trying to erase me. It started with numbers. They never lie. People do. I'd been noticing oddities in our internal financial reports for months, tiny inconsistencies, minor fluctuations, projects that started, got funded, and then quietly disappeared. I flagged them in board meetings, only to be told I was overworked or reading into things too much. My dad, Charles Bennett, was the CEO. My older brother, Ryan, the COO to the outside world. We were the perfect family. Inside, Preston Bennett Pharmaceuticals. Though there were secrets rotting under every shiny press release. One night, after another boardroom brush-off, I stayed late. I figured if no one else cared enough to look deeper, I had clearance, of course I did. But even my access had limits. when I found a hidden directory labeled Project Hyacinth. It was locked behind an encryption key only top-level execs had. So I worked around it, and I found everything. Buried in that folder was the real clinical trial data for our flagship drug. Not the version we gave to the FDA. Those results painted a miracle. No, these were the real numbers, the ones showing the drug had failed. Repeatedly. Not only that, but people had gotten sick. A few had died. And there was a coordinated effort to make it all disappear. Emails, bribes, fake trial reports, legal settlements paid in silence. We weren't just ignoring side effects. We were suppressing life-saving alternatives. Any competitor who got close to outperforming us was quietly acquired, gutted, and discarded. This wasn't just corporate negligence. This was intentional destruction of anything that might challenge our bottom line. I copied everything to a secure drive and was halfway through a second pass when my dad's direct line rang. It was our head of security, Martin Cho. "Sir, we've got unauthorized access on Project Hyacinth. Flagged at your terminal." I froze. I hadn't realized the files were being monitored. There was a pause. Then, "Leah." My dad's voice came through the speaker. "Calm, cold. I'll handle it. Activate the protocol. Just in case. Just in case." That was when I knew I wasn't walking out of the building as an executive. I was walking out as a threat. He came in not long after, still in his tux from a charity dinner, smiling like nothing had changed. "Working late?" I smiled back. "Just reviewing some reports." Funny. Most reports don't include classified drug trials. I didn't lie. I didn't even flinch. "I know what you did," I said. "I know what Ryan did. People died. You buried the truth." He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just nodded, almost like he respected me for finding out. "You've always been too curious for your own good," he said. I should have run. Should have called someone. But it was already too late. He pushed a button on his desk. The door opened, and Martin walked in with two men I didn't recognize. My dad looked at me like a disappointed professor. "You're not well, Leah. The stress, the pressure, it's taken its toll." They were rewriting the narrative in real time. "You'll get the help you need. The best care. Just some time to rest." I backed away, heart hammering. But they were too fast. Martin grabbed my arm. I struggled, but it was pointless. "You can do this quietly," my dad said. "Or you can make it harder." My voice caught in my throat. "You're insane." "No," he replied. "I'm protecting our family." They drove me out to a private facility called Brookhaven Hills Recovery Center, a luxury wellness retreat in the mountains with 247 staff, locked doors, and smiling nurses who all called me brave and fragile. They told everyone I'd had a breakdown. "Burnout," they whispered. "She was under a lot of pressure." My father even went on TV and said he loved me and hoped I'd heal. The truth, I'd never been clearer. And the best part, they never searched me. The flash drive was still with me, tucked inside a cheap necklace with a hidden USB I'd worn every day for years. I let them medicate me. I let them talk at me in therapy. I played the role of someone broken because that's what they needed to see. And while they congratulated themselves for silencing me, I planned. Brookhaven Hills was polished on the outside, but underneath it was lazy, arrogant. It wasn't built to hold someone like me, someone who wasn't really sick. I made allies. People like Ari, a former hedge fund manager's wife, who ended up there after threatening to expose her husband. Or Ben, a cybersecurity consultant who got voluntarily committed after refusing to work for a government defense contractor. We shared secrets. We watched staff routines. We made a map of the facility in crayons during art therapy. 3 months in, we triggered a false fire alarm at 3 a.m. Ben had already cloned a staff badge weeks earlier. I slipped out the back door in a stolen uniform, got in a car waiting down the road, and didn't look back. The driver, Elena Kim, a junior analyst at our company who'd quietly sent me encrypted messages from inside Preston Bennett during my stay. "You're not alone." She'd written, "I believe you, and I have proof, too." I went dark after that. Changed my name. Changed cities. Built a paper trail that showed I'd taken a sabbatical to recover abroad. In reality, I was in a quiet neighborhood in Vancouver, working under a new identity, building a new life and a case file the size of a suitcase. I had everything now. Trial data, offshore payment records, victim testimony, internal memos, and most important names. 3 years passed. They thought I was gone. I was just getting started. 3 years went by, but I didn't forget a single face. Not my father's, calm and calculated behind a podium, not my brother's, smirking at the quarterly numbers while people suffered in silence. And certainly not the board, the ones who clapped through announcements they knew were built on lies, while they smiled for shareholders. I rebuilt myself from the ground up. I became Elena Ward, consultant for a Vancouver-based biotech firm. Not a flashy job, but perfect for staying under the radar and plugged into the world I used to know so well. I paid in cash, lived simply, and let my real identity fade into whispers. In public, I vanished. In private, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. Every day, I organized data from the flash drive. Every night, I compiled testimonies. I reached out through encrypted networks, through friends of friends, people who'd been burned or bullied into silence. Some were afraid. Most were just waiting for someone else to act first. I was that someone. The network grew slowly. There was Dr. Eric Huang, a former Preston Bennett researcher, who left quietly after raising questions about the trial process. He still had physical samples, along with internal communications that mysteriously disappeared from company servers. There was Clara Jenkins, an ex-project manager whose infant daughter died during a secret prenatal drug trial run under one of our shell companies. Her NDA was ironclad. So were the hospital records that proved she was right. And, of course, there was Sarah Ramirez, the intern who sent me the very first whistleblower tip about falsified side effects. She'd stuck around at Preston Bennett after I vanished, playing the long game while pretending she had no idea where I'd gone. She kept the receipts, every single one. They think I'm just another low-level cog. She told me over a secure line. They forget I know where the bodies are buried. Literally, I had the truth. I had the people. What I didn't have yet was power. Not the public kind. Not the kind that matters in boardrooms and hearings and front pages. So I got to work. Sarah introduced me to Nikhil, a securities analyst working with the SEC, who had long suspected something was off with Preston Bennett's filings. Once I sent him the first few packets of redacted data, just enough to get attention, he looped in the right people, quietly, carefully. Then came the FDA, through a contact of Marcus's, a tech-savvy ex-patient who'd once been prescribed our flagship drug and almost died from it. He'd been quietly working with the agency, building an internal complaint that no one had connected back to me yet. We're almost there, Sarah messaged. They're building cases, watching, waiting. So was I. Meanwhile, my family carried on like nothing had happened. My dad gave interviews about leadership under pressure. Ryan accepted an award for ethical entrepreneurship. They announced a new clinical trial aimed at underserved communities. The media clapped, none the wiser. They had no idea the whole thing was a house of cards. I watched, waited, connected the dots, and then I found it. A small, half-buried line item on an expense report Ryan had signed, hidden as regional R&D relocation. But it was actually a payment to shut down an independent research facility testing a generic drug that had better results than ours. I traced the funds to a fake holding company. I traced that company to another. And then I hit something unexpected. My mother's name. She died 10 years ago. Officially, it was a heart attack. She was the only person in our family who ever questioned my father's decisions in public. I'd always wondered if there was more to it. But wondering and knowing aren't the same. Now, I had a document she'd quietly co-signed weeks before her death. A complaint, a letter to the FDA, unsent, unsubmitted, saved in a folder on her old assistant's laptop, which Sarah tracked down. The timing made me sick. He silenced her. I told Sarah, just like he tried to silence me. Then let's speak louder, she replied. I decided on the shareholders' meeting. It was always my dad's showpiece. Media, investors, carefully pre-screened questions, an overly polished smile. This year, they were celebrating record-breaking earnings. I was going to celebrate something else. I sent my RSVP using a board guest login that hadn't been disabled. Classic Ryan oversight. Marcus and Clara helped prep the public drop documents, video interviews, timeline spreadsheets, financial trails, everything labeled and time-stamped for maximum clarity and minimum deniability. The FDA, SEC, and even Interpol were briefed, quietly, off-record. They didn't want to act too soon, but they were waiting. I walked into the hotel ballroom like I'd never left. Professional suit, neutral makeup, hair pulled back, no emotion, no fear. My dad stood on stage under glowing lights, thanking investors and projecting confidence. Ryan was checking his phone, half listening, just like always. I waited for the right moment. Then I stood. "Excuse me," I said. "There's something the room should know." My dad froze. Ryan looked up. A few people murmured. "My name is Leah Bennett, CFO of this company, until 3 years ago, when I was forcibly removed and falsely institutionalized. And I've returned today with the truth." I handed a folder to the nearest journalist. Someone gasped. Another picked up a phone. "The drugs you've been investing in," I said. "They failed. They weren't just flawed, they were dangerous. And the company you've trusted has known it for years." "Security," my father barked. "Already handled," I replied. Right on cue. 3 federal agents walked in. Badges, guns, orders in hand. The ballroom went dead silent. "Charles Bennett and Ryan Bennett," one agent said. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, securities fraud, and obstruction of justice." They read the charges one by one. I didn't look away. Not this time. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras rolled. For the first time in years, I stood in front of the Preston Bennett logo as myself. "Where were you?" a reporter asked. "Hiding." Another guessed. "No," I said. "I was working." "Working on what?" I looked straight into the camera. "Justice." My father didn't look at me as they cuffed him. Ryan did. I'll never forget that look. Not angry, not shocked, just hollow. Like the world he thought was unshakable had been ripped out from under him, and he hadn't even realized the floor had cracks as they were led away. The crowd around us dissolved into panic. Some people ran, some stayed, he whispering. Investors, journalists, junior execs who'd once smiled at me in the hallway but never said a word after I vanished. Now they were looking at me like I was the ghost of something they all tried to forget. Back in the press room, the FBI and SEC laid it all out. Years of clinical fraud, falsified trial data, bribery, the strategic dismantling of independent research labs that could have released safer, cheaper alternatives. And, for the first time, publicly, the investigation into my mother's death. I didn't speak much that first day. The agencies handled the press. The files did the rest. I didn't need to perform. The truth was loud enough on its own. The next few weeks were a blur of interviews, subpoenas, media coverage, and legal prep. The files I'd saved, rock solid, not just data, but timelines, names, motives, cross-confirmed by whistleblowers from inside and outside the company. My testimony was just one piece. There were dozens. Sarah, Elena, Marcus, Clara. They all came forward. Each one carried their own scar. Each one wanted to make sure no one else got buried like we did. Ryan tried to flip first, offered to testify against my father in exchange for a lighter sentence. But what he didn't know was that I'd already sent a second batch of evidence to prosecutors that pinned several initiatives directly to him. The funds, the acquisitions, the paper trail he thought he'd deleted. "You were always better with numbers," Sarah told me after his plea deal was rejected. He just knew how to hide behind them. At the trial, I saw my father for the first time in months. He looked tired, still sharp, but older, smaller. When I stepped onto the stand and took the oath, he finally raised his head. I spoke calmly, clearly. No tears, no dramatics. I told the court exactly what I saw, what I found, what I survived. "Was there a moment," the attorney asked, "when you realized what your father and brother had done?" "There wasn't just one," I said. "There were hundreds. Every day they let it continue. They were choosing power over people. I just stopped letting them choose for me." When I left the witness stand, I didn't look back. The verdict came 3 weeks later. Guilty, both of them, multiple counts. Securities fraud, obstruction, corporate manslaughter. My father got 42 years. Ryan got 27. Neither spoke at sentencing. But as he was being taken out of the courtroom, Ryan turned to me and said, "You'll never run this company." I didn't respond, because by then, I had already made my decision. The board of Preston Bennett Pharmaceuticals was dissolved under government oversight. What was left of the company was placed into a public trust, while new leadership was formed, not by shareholders, but by a medical ethics panel, overseen by federal regulators. They offered me the CEO seat. I declined, not because I was afraid, but because I was done trying to fix something so deeply broken. Let it be rebuilt from the ground up, I told them, with new people, not under the name of the men who buried the truth for decades. Instead, I created something new, Bennett Foundation for Ethical Science, named after my mother's family name. not my father's. We offer grants to independent researchers, legal support for whistleblowers, and mental health services for people targeted by corporate retaliation. Sarah runs operations. Marcus handles cybersecurity. Elena heads outreach. The same people they tried to erase now lead the charge for integrity. It's been a year since the trial. Preston Bennett no longer exists. Its former buildings now house nonprofit medical initiatives. Some government-funded, some donor-supported. The flagship research lab is now the Catherine Bennett Center for Medical Transparency, named for my mom. There's a plaque outside the door. It reads, "Truth does not go away when you ignore it. It waits." People sometimes ask me if I regret taking them down. If I ever think about what could have happened if I'd just stayed quiet, if I'd let it go, and maybe in a different life, I would have. Maybe if my mom hadn't been silenced. Maybe if they hadn't tried to lock me up and throw away the key. But when someone tries that hard to make you disappear, the only real answer is to stand taller, louder, brighter. I visit my mom's grave every month. I bring her a white lily and a report from the foundation. I tell her what we're funding, what we've stopped, and who we've helped. Last time, I stood there longer than usual. "We did it," I whispered. They thought I broke. They thought I vanished. But I was just building the storm, and when it came, they weren't ready.